Okay, so welcome to our first independent project. Your task for this week is to create something that you design completely. Um, and to give you a little bit of inspiration, I want to talk a little bit about some famous ceramic artists. So we'll start with maybe the most famous or one of the most famous ceramic artists during the 1960s, this guy, Peter Voulkos. Sort of changed the way people thought about um, ceramics in general. He sort of adopted an abstract expressionist mindset, which meant that he worked sort of from his gut instead of worrying about like how well this teapot will pour water or how light a cup is, those sorts of things. He used the clay and throwing in particular in his early work as a means to just be expressive and let the moment guide his decision making. So he would throw pieces and cut them apart, squeeze them, punch them, poke a hole in them, and reassemble them. So you see him here working on a large construction made out of thrown cylinders, and then you see some examples on the right. So your piece could be something that you make on the wheel, but maybe it isn't something that has a definitive purpose. It's a non-functional piece, a more sculptural piece itself. If you're starting this way, you're probably going to have to start by getting back on the wheel and getting a feel for throwing again, for centering, for pulling up the walls. And that's okay. Like this week could be one of those weeks where you try to make 3 or 4 bowls or cylinders or cups on the wheel just to get your skill level back to a point where you feel like you can control the clay. Um, but maybe later in the quarter, you might think about doing something where you're stacking pieces or putting them on top of one another. Danny Rhodes is probably more famous for the books that he wrote about ceramics than his sculpture itself. However, I really like this piece, and I always kind of sort of have liked his sculptures that he used molds to create these cool faces with textures and that sort of thing. So it could be a sculptural use of the clay, um, or it could be on the potter's wheel. So it's always a good idea to look at others who are successful on the potter's wheel. Lucy Rye is probably one of those people you want to look at with their elegant forms that sometimes she would alter just slightly, um, either the surface or the form by giving it a squeeze or something like that. So she's another one that I might encourage you to take a look at to get inspiration for different kinds of forms. Bernard Leach, same way, maybe a little bit more like Danny Rhodes in that he was very famous for techniques that he learned in Japan and China and brought back to England and the United States and then wrote about them. So if you needed to know how to do something, probably all you needed to do was go get a book by Bernard Leach. But got a constructed piece here, hand built. That's got some pieces that were thrown on the wheel, and it's just something simple like a bowl. And you'll notice that the decoration on here has this kind of thickness to it. That's called slip trailing. When you take something like a underglaze and instead of brushing it onto the surface, actually use some sort of a syringe or tube to squeeze out your design. That could be something that might be interesting to some of you as well. Robert Arneson is another sculptor. Unlike Daniel Rhodes, his work has kind of a wicked sense of humor to it, so I've always really enjoyed his stuff. A lot of it's self-portraits, and you can see him there. Some of it is the kind of stuff we really can't show you in the school, but you can certainly go seek it out yourself. He's part of a group of artists that called themselves funk artists during the 80s and into the 90s, based largely in California. But their work, which had kind of a pop art lean to it, gained popularity, and people still talk about his work and the work of others like him today. So looking up him or maybe funk art might be a way of getting some ideas going. Paul Cummins and Tom Piper created this large installation of poppies at the London Tower. And basically, what they did was created all these ceramic flowers as a metal um, stem, and then people volunteered to help put them into the ground. Like you kind of paid, so it's sort of like half fundraiser, half art project. But they definitely got that sense of repetition, unifying, and this whole idea of making many little things work together as a larger thing is something that you could think about yourself, maybe as a project that continues beyond just this week. So I always do that when I move myself. Last one, I kind of found this guy recently, but I liked his stuff when we were talking about contrast in Ceramics 1. I like the way he cuts his pieces and has like this sort of flat geometric or um, this flat surface and then this sort of biomorphic, almost round form. So I figured I'd share him with you as well. And there are countless others. So those were just a few to get you thinking. But a quick Google search might lead you in some directions that will help you to come up with something exciting. And of course, try to make it your own. Don't just copy somebody else's work. But as a first independent project, looking at what other people are doing, I think is a good idea. So I'm going to escape out of this and stop my presentation at this point. And I look forward to seeing what you come up with.